Welcome, everybody. If it's Tuesday night and it's 6 o'clock, it's All Things Brunswick. We're here in Brunswick County during primary day, and this is Bill Moore. Let me say hello to my co-hosts.
Mary Stillwell, hello.
Dan Roman.
King of the Wild Frontier.
For sure.
Bald and beautiful every day.
Yeah, well, one out of two is not bad. The word and. Anyway, welcome, everybody, to our show. We got an interesting show for you tonight. It is primary day in Brunswick County. If you haven't had a chance to vote yet, you have till 7:30 to get there. So get out there and vote. You know, we don't care which way you vote as long as it's Republican. And that's not fair.
Well,
we
you
need
don't have
you to vote.
much choice on a primary. You have to vote for whatever party you're
That's
affiliated
true.
with.
But the important thing is that you get out there and vote.
It actually is.
We
It's
can-
just as important as the general election, in my opinion.
Well, yeah, because
Go ahead. No, go.
parties do not select candidates. People select candidates.
Right.
And if you don't vote and you don't get involved in the primary, then you're letting someone else decide who's going to run and who's going to represent you.
Well, you said that very politely. The way I would put it is, if you ain't voting, you have no right to bitch later on about who's running.
Thank you, Dan.
I'm a little more blunt than Bill, but
Thank you, Dan.
See, I'm the classy one, and that scares me.
well, that's But the reality is, though, a lot of people tend to ignore the primaries and the locals elections, and they, to me, frankly, are the most critical ones. And make sure you vote the entire ballot. Don't just go in and vote for, one or two candidates that you may like or know, and then ignore the rest of the ballot. Take the time. Doesn't take much time to do a little research and pick the candidates for each office that you want to run for the party.
Which we absolutely recommend that you vote your judges. This is so very important. If you think about it, whenever there is a dispute, where does it end up? It ends up with your judge. So please vote the judges. Vote the entire ballot.
Yeah, that's a good point. A lot of people don't think the judges matter much, but as we're seeing at every level, federal, state, and even some locals, it's the judges who are determining a lot of things.
Yeah, and we certainly have groups now that go out and they shop a judge.
Absolutely.
The judge in an area that they think will vote their way, and that's where they file the lawsuit. And then we start running things up. Look at voter ID. I mean, that was a constitutional amendment, years ago? And we still can't get it in effect because we're suing in two different...
Correct.
We're suing in federal and state court, and there's enough activist judges sitting there to stop the will of the people.
Correct.
And never mind the fact that we need judges that uphold the law, not try to make the law.
That's the key phrase right there. Their job is to interpret what the legislature has determined the law should be, or the voters, in the case of voter ID, because they did vote for it.
Or the intent of that
Or the
legislature.
intent of it, not to determine or
Absolutely.
make the law.
And unfortunately, too often, we're seeing just the opposite. So that judge is an important thing to do. And you're
It
absolutely
is.
right.
So I think, Bill, why don't you let the folks know that Brunswick County is looking great today for voter turnout for a primary.
Yeah, we had an average run for early voting, but today the polls are jammed. I mean, we're looking probably in this county having, by the time this is done, 10,000 or more people turning out on this day to vote, which is a great sign. I wish more people would vote, but it's a good sign that people are getting involved today, and it looks the people voting look to be heavily Republican from what we can find out. So
I think we're going to see this carry over into the fall, too. People who've long avoided politics are seeing what's going on, and now they're saying, it's time for me to step up.
They're
Enough is
unhappy.
enough.
Yeah.
They're very
And-
unhappy.
And that's how we bring about change, is through our votes, right? Not activism as far as violence or any of that, voting.
I'd like to also recommend that you vote for the people who have already placed your interest and also placed your consideration. And we have many candidates that are running again who have proven their worth. So when you go out to vote tonight, keep that in mind, please.
and you can vote till 7:30. So, and the rule is if you're on the line at 7:30 and you haven't gotten in yet, you're allowed to vote. So the excuse that the line is too long and they'll let me vote doesn't work. All you need to be is on that line at 7:30. What they will do is they'll send somebody out at that time, and that will be the last person they accept in the line. But everybody before that person will get the right to vote, and that's important. We need your voting. We need your ballots.
And if you aren't able to get out of your vehicle, there is curbside voting. Have someone drive you there. They'll take care of the rest.
I actually saw that when I voted today. There was a couple people doing the curbside, and I spent a couple minutes just watching. They handled it wonderfully.
The most important thing to all of us is that you vote. This is your right, and you have the opportunity today.
And this is your opportunity to decide who represents you. You know, this and then in November.
And then in the general election down there.
Right now, you're deciding within your party who's representing you. That gives me a little personal pang when I start talking about unaffiliated.
Why don't you talk, for real though, why don't you talk a little bit about how that process works? Because a lot of people, like if you're a registered Republican, you vote in the Republican primary. If you're a Democrat, you vote in the Democratic primary. And those are the only ones you can vote for.
However, if you are unaffiliated, you can ask for either ballot.
That's correct.
You can go in and say, I want a Democratic ballot or I want a Republican
But you
ballot.
only get one or the other.
You can't get both.
Right.
That's true. We've had people try over the last few days to get both, but that did not work. So that's important. Actually, the only people in this county who could not vote is libertarian people.
Right.
And there are about 667 of them, if I remember, and there's no ballot for them because there's no primary at all for them. So they're the only people that didn't have the right to vote, but all 121,000 and change other people had a right to get there and ask for a ballot. And you have till 7:30 to get it done.
And the misconception is that you can go in during a primary and vote the person. No, you cannot. You must vote straight ballot of your choice.
But whatever you vote, vote the whole ballot.
That's the point I was making earlier. Is a lot of people will, because there's Senate is up, and there's I swear there was a dozen candidates for Senate.
The Senate is up. The House of Representatives
House was
is up.
up.
You have the General Assembly up in the Senate, state Senate.
The point is, don't just vote those. Right? Everybody knows Senate. Everybody knows House, and I know there's people. That's all. The only two they'll vote. Vote the entire ballot.
And you have county commissioners. You'll have school board members.
And those people have more power over your life day to day than anyone in the Senate or House does. They're the ones that make your local taxes in the sense of the commissioners.
And the school board.
And the school board. They determine what's going to be done in curriculum for the school board case, what's going to be done in the county for growth and stuff like that. It has a direct effect on you far more than the federal or state level. That's just my opinion. I think the local is more important than any other. It's something that's been a bugaboo of mine for 40 years now, that people tend to avoid those and they don't realize that has the most drastic effect.
To make a difference, I agree, Dan, you must start locally.
It really does.
You must start locally.
If you look at, for example, where I live, they're starting to pave some of the streets they haven't paved mine. Well, who determines that? Not senator for the state or either senator. It's the local people. In my case, it is.
Your case is wrong. It's actually done by the
DOT. Oh, really?
Unless it's a municipality.
It is a municipality.
It's certain roads there are covered by the municipality, but most of the time.
But most by the DOT.
So even the counties are generally out of that business.
Okay.
He what? That mic to him.
That mic to him.
I'm so good I get two.
That's the last thing we need, is to give him a bigger voice than he has.
Oh, my goodness. We couldn't hear Bill. I'm so sorry.
It
doesn't take much. Good old TK taking care of us. Shout out to TK over there.
Yes, shout out to TK. Thank
we wouldn't
you.
be here without him.
No.
We never give him enough love, and this show is run by him.
Yep,
and it would fall apart in a minute if it wasn't for him.
And we fall apart with or without him sometimes on our own. But
we do.
Let's give the folks some figures on what it takes to be a candidate.
Yeah, that's something that has bothered me for a long time. You know, you talk about running for office, and frankly, we've gotten to the point now where the average person can't run for office. You know, they're talking at a minimum, somebody wrote in an article, at a minimum 2 years ago to run for a council office in a local town or an alderman, depending where you are, it's an average of $15,000 to $20,000 just to run for that job. And the higher you go, the worse it is.
Yes.
Now, I did some research on the 2020 campaign, which I've shared with my colleagues here, and I'm not sure everybody knows these numbers. But, for example, in the presidential election in 2020, President Biden raised over $1 billion to run, and he spent almost all of it. And in addition to that, there was outside money PACs that threw almost $600 million into that PAC. Now, Trump was not near it, but he's no slouch. He raised $773, almost $774 million, and he had outside money of about $314 million. I'll get you, most of it was spent. So, but think about that if you want to run for president.
Yeah, so between the two of them, you're looking at $2.5 billion roughly
To run for an office.
To run just that office.
Right.
And that's not counting any other candidates.
For a job that doesn't quite pay that salary.
I hate that.
And yet they all become rich when they're in that job.
Yes.
Well, that's a side note. But it's to me, that's eye-opening numbers.
It certainly
really
is.
When you look at some interesting numbers, let's go to the House of Representatives, for example. 2-year job, salary is about $177,000 a year. Our representative, David Rouser, he raised about $740,000 for his, and this is not the current campaign. This is going back to 2020.
The prior one, 2020.
Right, of which he spent over $600,000 just to get elected in the 7th district, which is 8 or 9 counties.
Right.
So it's not even a major number there. And if you go even further, look at Pelosi. Pelosi raised almost $16 million and spent, about $15.5 million, spent a little, almost $16 million, and still has a bank account of $5.75 million for the future.
Gee, how do you do that?
And then, the other side of that, too, is you look at that. She's got in the bank, was it $5.75 million? Whoever tries to run against her is starting from zero.
For the most part.
Exactly.
Pretty much, right? And that's why you see incumbents go for, how long has she been in? 30 whatever years?
1 year is too long for her, but we're not
Well,
going that way.
I wasn't trying to go there, but you're right. 1 day is too long.
Yeah. But again, and you have to look at the fact that if you read a book by Snyder a few years ago, which was the cash cow for the state, he pointed out that when a congressman gets elected, the new freshmen come in, they're told to spend about 18 months of their life fundraising out of 2 years.
Yes, they are.
And they have to go out and get that money if they're going to get reelected, because what people don't hear, one of the reasons that the speaker gets that kind of money and she can control what's going on, and same thing in the Senate, you want a seat on a certain job, there's a charge for that seat. It could be $10 million, $1,000, it could be 20, depending on how high you want to go. And that candidate or that congressman has to raise that money if he wants to be effective for his people. And so he's got to be working the phones all the time for a 2-year commitment, because by the time he turns around, it's time to run again.
Right. And the thing is that you can plan and plan and plan. However, you never anticipate what could happen, what you need to spend. I know that the candidates I have spoken to state that, okay, they figured I would spend X amount of dollars, and it's gone well beyond that.
Oh, they all have a budget, but that budget gets thrown out the window.
Absolutely. When I ran for office, the same thing happened to me. I was going to spend this amount of money. Didn't happen that way.
It's funny because I've been offered to run for a couple of different offices, and that's the reason I won't run. Primarily is it's not something I'm
this is an
good at or wanna do.
astronomical amount of money.
Yep.
It's just
And if you start looking now,
and then
go
you
to
look
the
at
U.S.
Senate. I was just going to say, let's talk Senate.
Senator Schumer, who's the majority leader in the Senate, has raised almost $37 million. Okay, he spent about 10, and he has in the bank about $37 million. So
And when you think about, he spent $10 million when he knew he was going to win. I mean, he was a slam dunk. There was no way he was going to lose.
Yeah.
But he also controls some of that money that he can send to various candidates.
Okay, you beat me to it. I was going to say he's spreading the wealth. Is that a good way to put it?
That's a great way to put it, Dan.
And so when you say he spent $10 million, it's not necessarily for him per se.
Now, if you look at our 2 senators from North Carolina, and some of this you have to remember goes back to when they were last elected. So, for example, Senator Burr, he was elected 6 years ago, basically, And since that time he's raised about $12 million. He spent about $9 million, and his in his account is $66,000. I'm not going to figure out how that adds up.
No.
There's a problem there, but
Something ain't making sense there.
yeah, I tried to research that a couple of places, and it doesn't clean up real well. Senator Tillis has raised, and he just was reelected 2 years ago.
Right, 2020.
So $25 million in round numbers. He spent just about $24.5 million, and that $600 some thousand dollars he's got left basically balances out because he's
Yes.
also getting contributions on a regular basis.
But what's
Right.
interesting is, so Burr ran in 2016, if I'm doing my math right, and Tillis in 2020. So 4-year difference, almost double the spending.
Oh, yes, it is.
And, the Tillis had a tough campaign until the very end there when his opponent
Made a mistake.
Let's say stepped in it and just leave it at that. But you think about that much more money it took to run just 4 years later. Where's it going to be 4 years from now or 40 years from now?
Oh, my goodness.
If we all know about longleaf politics in this state, and they've done some great research. Andrew Dunn is one of the leaders in that. He was asked by someone, how much does it cost to win an election in our state? He did some study, and he went to study winning candidates in 2016. His research showed that it cost $20 million to win the gubernatorial race, to be the governor.
To be governor.
$20 million in 2016.
Yeah, so based on the Senate, it's probably 25, 30 next election.
And if you're going to run for council of state, over $200,000 for that, and that's Secretary of State. It could be agriculture. It's those 10 people that are run separately there, and that's just phenomenal dollars.
What about like lieutenant governor? Probably about the same as governor.
He's considered part of council of state.
Okay. So that's why I was curious on that. And then you think about all the other campaigns that are out there. We're talking huge sums of money being spent primarily on advertising of various sorts.
And yet there are exceptions to every rule. For example, in Pennsylvania, or it was Jersey, it might have been a couple of years ago, there's a guy that ran for the state Senate. He spent $100.
I remember that. Yes, I do
he spent
remember
$100
that.
and he won.
I think it was Jersey.
It was Jersey.
That's
I'm
right.
sure it was Jersey.
That's right.
And he drove around the state, put gas in his truck, and he spoke everywhere he could go. I will tell you another one in our state that didn't win the last election, but did almost the same thing was Dan Forrest.
He was
Yes.
everywhere.
When Dan ran
Yes.
those 2 times for lieutenant governor, he hit all 100 counties multiple times. He was on the road consistently, and a lot of what he was doing was talking to people, and that works.
Yes, it does.
There needs to be more of that, I think. I mean, and it's tough for people who are incumbents to get out because they got to do the job also. But that interaction with the public, I think that's key.
People need to get to know their candidates.
And the candidates need to get to know the people too.
Exactly, and
you know.
how better to know one another than to meet and talk.
And have an honest conversation.
Yes.
Hopefully, because you may not agree with them on everything, and that's fine. What's that rule? If it's 70%,
70%, the Reagan rule.
yeah, you're doing great. I don't personally expect any candidate and I to be 100% in lockstep. And to me, there's no single issue that's make or break. I'm open on everything, but I look at the overall. What does the candidate represent the values that I want in general? And there are sometimes they are in favor or against things that I'm the opposite on. I may not like it entirely, but I respect them because it's okay to be different on some issues.
They're just people.
We're all people, right? And unfortunately, we're reaching the point in this country where everything's black and white. You're either for or against something, and if you're against something that I'm for, I need to hate you. And I just loathe that we've reached that point.
Yes.
We need to go back to simpler times, for want of a better term. And you go back to the Reagan years in the 80s. You go back to the Kennedy years in the 60s, okay? There was a difference in attitude. We could disagree
Absolutely.
philosophically, but we could go out to dinner together.
Yep.
And they used to.
And politicians
Yeah.
used all the time. Tip O'Neill and Ronald Reagan was my favorite example.
Yeah.
Tip was the leader of the House of Representatives, a Democrat, and Reagan was president. Yet they had great respect for each other. Didn't agree on everything or a whole lot, but they managed to do what they needed to do, and they were respectful.
And they
Key
conducted
word, respect.
respectful, and they conducted business for the benefit of the country.
Exactly.
They may not agree on everything, but
Yes.
they could find enough common ground for a lot of things that they could move things forward, as opposed to now where pretty much every vote, say in Congress, it's black and white. One side votes one way, the other side votes the other. You don't see any mixed votes much.
You know, we're getting to the point where we only need to elect one person from each party, and they can
It's-
just cast the vote.
You're
because
not
they
too
vote
far
in
off.
step.
Yeah.
They vote in step, and then we
do.
complain when they don't.
Yeah, well, I mean, you look at what's happening with Manchin right now. He's getting vilified, and
Yes, he is.
but when you listen to him, and I'm not saying this because I agree with a lot of what he's voting, in favor of.
He does what he believes.
He follows his heart,
Yes.
I guess is the way.
Yes.
And there are times he votes ways that I wish he didn't, but there's times he votes ways that I wish he did.
I'm sorry, but he's an awesome individual.
I respect him.
I
do. I respect
have
him.
seen him
He mentioned
and
that.
heard him. And
I actually, for real, like if we were talking about going out to dinner, I would love to go out to dinner with him just because it would be an honest discussion on the things we disagreed with, and it would be respectful.
You want to take a different view a little bit with Manchin. With the beating he's taken in his party, and he's in a state that's basically Republican.
It's what, like
Now.
90%, isn't
Yeah.
it?
now it is.
Now it is. Yeah.
But he has to stand election. It would be real easy for him to switch over and become a Republican, get reelected. He could.
Right.
However, he's got enough integrity to realize that the minute he does that, the control of the Senate flips.
Yes.
Correct.
So he's willing to stand up for what he believes, but not cause the earthquake and other crises for the country. And you got to give the man credit for that.
Absolutely.
I also have to acknowledge the fact that basically he is the Senate right now. Whatever way he votes, that's how it goes.
There's also one woman that tends to join him in the Democratic Party.
Yeah, I'm
too.
trying to. I know it from Arizona.
Yeah, and I can't think of her name right now.
Now I feel bad but you're right. But essentially, if you
He's
think
the number
about it,
one. Occasionally, he gets help from this
right?
lady.
And what a position for him to be in, both
He's-
good and bad. There's good and bad to that, right? So he catches a ton of flack.
He's a very good speaker. You can tell that when I was so impressed when I heard him. I was in Charleston, West Virginia. He speaks from his heart, and you know that. It is so obvious. He doesn't add adjectives or everything else to make himself look good. He just
He doesn't try and
says
talk
it the
over.
way it is.
When he talks, he's not trying to use the big words. I think that's kind of where you're
Exactly.
going with it. He's talking to us, and again, that's another reason to respect
And
him.
I have to tell you, I mean, both parties over there, they really like him.
I think they respect him more than anything.
I don't think that the liberals over there are that angry with him per se because of what Bill said. He has the integrity to remain a Democrat.
Even though very easily he could solve a lot of his issues.
But in the same respect, the Republicans in that state really appreciate his honesty in what they believe in. So,
And you know,
If he were to flip parties, he'd basically guarantee his reelection.
absolutely.
yes.
And by not doing so, he is putting himself at risk.
And, if you consider the fact he's being vilified by his party anyway, currently, it wouldn't change much if he flipped. Not much is
No.
going to change.
No, it really
Except
wouldn't.
he'd get a lot more support from the other party. So to stand by his principles and say, I'm not going to cause a crisis in this chamber. I believe in the chamber. I believe in the veto and all this, and the override and the 66 votes and whatever else. And I'm not going to cause a crisis there, but I'll take the heat. And the other thing I like about the man, he's one of the politicians, few politicians, that when he listens to people, you think he's really listening.
He is.
I believe he actually listens.
He really is.
you know.
They took questions from the crowd, very few, but a few. And one lady was really soft-spoken, and he couldn't really hear her. So he stopped everything so that he could hear
her.
exactly what she was saying.
There are people that when you talk to, you can see them looking in their eyes. They're raising their next question, their next point, and they're just
Yes.
waiting for you to shut up. Not that they want to listen to you. They're waiting to get their
They
part
have
back.
their bullet points up
Right,
here,
they're right here.
or in our president's case, on a card in front of him because he can't remember what he's supposed to say.
And someone's got to read it to him. No, I didn't say
that too. But and I've been seen the other side of it, like you're talking about, where you go and you hear a senator or rep, whomever, governor speak, and somebody asks a question and they don't even think about answering it. They're on to.
And
"Well, thank
usually
you
the
for your
first
question,
clue
but-"
is, could you repeat the question?
Yeah, well, that's another one.
Yes.
Yes. And, it's, people like Manchin, and there's others out there. I think give me hope, and both parties. There's people in both parties. I think give me hope that the rancor that's going on right now will eventually subside. I don't know that it'll entirely ever go away.
If it doesn't, they'll be throwing shoes at each other next.
Well,
and
yeah,
that's-
well, they might be throwing more than that, unfortunately. But I don't think it's going to happen anytime soon. I think,
I think it happens when the American people have had enough.
and I'm hoping we've reached the tipping point.
Boy,
I
me
personally
too.
think we're starting to see signs of it.
You know, I even see, even with the primaries, people are sick of hearing negative. What they really want to hear is,
Yes, they
if
are.
I put you in office, what are you going to do?
Right.
I don't want to hear what the platform is for the party. I don't want to hear what the other guy did or didn't do. I want to hear what you're going to do if I elect you.
Absolutely.
I
And
would
don't give me the
rather-
blockades.
I would rather a candidate told me they were going to do something that I totally disagreed with, because I'd at least know, than not tell me anything, which is what most of them do.
And twice as mad as when they do it anyway.
And then they turn around and do it, and you feel like you've been bamboozled.
Well, you know, the old story with that is two people can betray you, but if it's one of your friends, it's twice as bad. You know, you react twice as badly because
Or
of that.
I would say somebody that you believed in. If you really truly believed in someone and then they betrayed you, I mean, that would be devastating.
It's, you know, you have an enemy who betrays you versus a good friend that betrays you. You're 10 times more mad at that,
Oh,
that
right.
friend than that
Yep.
enemy because you didn't
Absolutely.
expect it from them.
Exactly.
You know,
And you thought they had their backs.
I always respect people who have differing opinions from mine if they express them in an adult manner, so to speak. And I'm good with that. It's when, you know, they get slimy with it, if you will, and they tell you what you want to hear to try and get in, and then turn around and do things you didn't want. That's
Right.
And I think that's happened a lot. Both parties, to be fair, tend to have some politicians. Not everybody. Again, I'm generalizing, but it's really it's not that big. But I think it kind of has started through all of American politics. We're starting to see more and more of it.
Yes.
It's all about going back to what we're starting with. It's all about getting elected, and that takes money and not making a mistake.
Exactly.
And, you know, when you go back to the money point, you know, and this is all this information, by the way, is coming from the Center for Responsive Politics. But think about this: if you need to get $1 million, $500,000, $100,000, and you don't have it, people are giving it to you because you're cute. They're
It's-
expecting somewhere
yes.
down the road they've purchased some influence, whether you intend to do it or not. They're going to be calling back at you, and they're going to be saying, "Hey, look, you know, I gave you this money. I was in your
Yep.
corner,
I need this.
and now what are you going to do for me?"
Yep.
So-
And
Bill, explain to the folks what soft money donations are and PAC donations.
PAC donations are political action groups. They're parties out there, and they give donations, and they, how do I best describe it? They're not candidate parties. The candidates really don't have any control over them. However, they do pick up one candidate or the other, and very often these are the same people that are throwing out the most outrageous commercials or ads that are the most attack-centered. And, you know, you can label they're labeling a candidate because you're against this guy, and that means you're in favor of him, whether that man agrees with what you did or not. You know, and they're absolutely destructive of people. You know, I think.
Now, are
I
these
agree.
organizations the ones who require payback?
Requires a tough word, I think.
I don't think that. First of all, I think they believe that you believe with whatever they believe of you 100%. And God help you if you don't deliver, because they're not in the forgiving mood. They're not going
No,
to
they'll
agree
turn
that
on
you
you.
agree with you 70% of the time.
Right.
You need to be 100% in their corner, or they're going to come after you later, and they're going to find someone else to run against you.
And they have millions upon millions of dollars. And,
you have-
know, I mean, everybody talks about 2020, and Zuckbucks, as they're called, Zuckerberg had PACs. He donated millions and millions of dollars.
What is the percentage that a candidate would get from a PAC?
A candidate is only allowed to accept
a city.
$5,600 per election.
Right. From a PAC.
from a PAC if I give it to you. However, there is nothing that says I can't run 100 commercials in support of you. We're on the radio. We're on the air.
Right down.
Nice talking to you. Speaking of PAC,
Speaking of it, go on.
where was I?
You're talking about PACs and donating.
How much
they can donate.
receive.
Oh, the 5,600 to a candidate, and but if they go out and spend it on their own, and they'll say like, the candidate is not responsible for
Right.
what I'm doing. We didn't take any money from them. They can spend what they want.
So I was watching various, like I watched the morning news and stuff like that, and you'd see various commercials going on. The overwhelming majority of them were PACs.
Yeah.
The way you can kind of tell they're not is the candidate will say, this has been paid for.
And I approve this
and I
message.
approve this. Then
Right.
you,
Yep.
that's not a PAC. But when they're not saying that, that's a PAC, and whether you agree with it or not, take it with a grain of salt.
And they're also probably the most vicious of anything you can
Or
hear.
Oh,
that's where the
absolutely.
dirty laundry gets aired.
Yes.
I think it's about time that we pay some
Oh,
bills so
hey.
our laundry stays clean.
Yes.
Wow.
So with that, we'll turn it over to the maestro of the
The
electronic keyboard
the
over
golden-
there.
Hey.
The golden man.
The clerk of court makes legal decisions that affect the lives of Brunswick County citizens daily. The current clerk of court, who is an attorney, has demonstrated this for many years. Katie Maiden has practiced law for over 10 years. To ensure that this quality of service continues, vote Katie Maiden for clerk of courts, paid for by the committee to elect Katie Maiden.
Paid for by the committee to elect Judge Michael Stadding. As a member of the United States Air Force, I stand for our nation. As a prosecutor, I took a stand against violent criminals. As an attorney for the Fraternal Order of Police, I took a stand for law and order. As a sitting conservative judge, I stand for our Constitution. And as a judge on the Court of Appeals, I will stand up for you. Vote for a battle-tested conservative. Stand with Stadding. Michael Stadding is a reservist for the United States Air Force. Use of his military rank, job titles does not imply endorsement by the Department of the Air Force or the Department of Defense.
This show is also sponsored by Dr. Tony Maglione. Dr. Tony is a cardiologist practicing in Wilmington. He accepts Medicare patients, and his office is located across the street from New Hanover Regional Medical Center at 2032 17th Street. The office number is 202-1071. Dr. Tony is an author whose last book is Rules for Conservative Patriots, and it can be purchased on Amazon. His website is www.drtonymag.com.
My name is Brian Wilson. I'm running for District Court Judge. During my lifetime, I've gone from protecting your God-given and constitutional freedoms as a combat vet of the U.S. military to working locally as a carpenter building homes while I worked my way through college. For the past 17 years, I've been protecting and defending your constitutional rights in the courtroom. I'm currently protecting our rights of our most vulnerable, our children, as the guardian ad litem attorney advocate for the children of Brunswick, Columbus, and Bladen County. I've spent my career serving our country, our state, and our communities, so I ask that you continue your confidence by voting for me, Brian Wilson, in the primary elections on May 17th. Thank you.
Veteran Awareness sponsored by You Are Not Alone. Today's veteran homeless rate is approximately 19,750, and the numbers are declining because of the various veteran programs. If you or a veteran you know is homeless, please call 877-4AID-VET. This is a confidential and toll-free call. From this veteran to other veterans, please be there to help our brother and sister veterans. Again, the number is 1-877-424-3838. And thank you for your service.
Yep.
We're back. It's part 2 of All Things Brunswick. Having a great discussion tonight about a lot of issues, including the election. Want to remind you, you got less than an hour left to vote. So if you haven't gotten out there, it's time to get out there and get in that line and do your civic duty and pick the candidates of your choice for the November election. Anybody want to add on that for a second?
And make sure that you vote the entire ballot. Your judges are as important as your senator.
I agree.
Thank you,
stole
Dan.
it from me. I was going to go there, but
Thank you,
we
Dan.
think too much alike, I think,
I know.
sometimes.
I'm not going
And
to
then
go
Bill's
there
just
either.
vacant most of the time.
I am not going
Uh-oh.
there.
Bill's starting to get
He
worried.
is getting a little cranky over there.
Moi?
Vous.
Moi.
Je parle français.
All right, guys, let's go into something a little more serious that's been ongoing for a while. And that's the mess in the Supreme Court, thanks to it's two parts of it. Was first of all,
I haven't heard anything about this.
Oh, let me tell you what I heard today.
why don't you take it
let's
over
go.
first, Mayor?
I will just start out by saying that I am just blown away by Michelle Obama getting out there today to state that if these states receive the power to determine Roe versus Wade, that every single woman's rights will be taken away. I just can't believe it. And they are stopping calling women women.
I
They're-
was just going to say, and how do you define a woman, Michelle?
I mean, it just blew my mind. I couldn't believe it. I stopped dead in my tracks and looked at the TV and went, what?
Well, I mean, to that point, what else have they got?
Yeah,
They're
but
getting
let's-
slaughtered on everything.
For the chance that some of our audience has been locked in a cellar for the last
Nobody
couple
knows.
of weeks
Oh, yes,
and
I'm
doesn't
so
know what's
Go
sorry.
going
ahead,
on.
Bill. Yeah, you probably should.
A
Thank
few
you.
weeks ago, it was leaked out of the Supreme Court, a first draft about the abortion case, and where it appears that sometime in June, our Supreme Court justices were going to do away with Roe versus Wade and return it to the state. So please understand,
And
they're
that's a
not
key
doing
point.
away with of the right to have an abortion.
No.
They're saying it is in fact a decision to be made by the individual state, and that's all
Yes.
this is about. So
And-
that's part one of the issue.
Yep.
Part two of the issue is all of a sudden, all these justices are being picketed, harassed by the left because of this possible decision, and that just happens to be against the law.
It's a federal
Yes.
law.
Yes, and no
Yes.
one's doing anything about
Yes.
it.
And who would enforce federal law? That would be things like the Department of Justice. Who's in charge of that? I can't think of his name. I don't know. But anyway,
By
you know,
din dun dun.
dun dun dun. You know, it's funny because you make a good point, Bill. This is being couched as it's taking away the right to an abortion. It is not.
No, it is
All
not.
this case is doing is throwing it back to an individual state to make a decision.
Exactly.
Now, I come at it from I don't care where you stand on abortion one way or the other. I'm looking at this as this is a state's issue. Right. And I don't it's not just abortion. I think the country in general has gotten too much power in the federal government. We're not supposed to be this way.
No, we're not. And I agree with you. It
That's-
should be the
The
state.
states should be making the majority of decisions on anything. The federal government's job is to protect us as a nation,
Which they're not doing.
which they don't do.
Which they're not doing.
And basically, and that's why I've been very vocal about it. I've caught a ton of flack because people are like, well, where do you stand on abortion? I don't bring that up. I simply go, my position is this is a state's issue.
Looked at the news lately. First of all, let's go to Chicago. Chicago has allocated $500,000 to become the regional center for abortions for any woman that wants to come there and get one. California has done the same thing at that level, and so has New York.
New York.
So therefore, if it was going to do away with all that stuff, they wouldn't be able to do that. So the problem is not what they're saying. The problem is they don't like being told these are the facts.
They want to implement their thoughts, their ideas, their values on everyone else.
Well, here's the deal. Speaking as a woman,
Uh-oh.
this gets me almost as much as windmills, guys. I'm telling you.
You brought up the windmills just for the record.
Just for the record, okay? I'm here to tell you that they say that they're infringing on women's rights. I think it's just the reverse. They're infringing on my rights to decide for myself. because they're pushing it at me continuously. You must do this. You must do this.
And you know what?
And they want the government to be able to tell me what I can do with my body. And I don't agree with that.
You know, it's interesting because I have a TikTok account. And I'm trying to promote that, but I have made some comments on there, and a lot of the comments I get back are from women who are pro-life and who feel that their voice is being squashed.
Well, absolutely, but it's not just about being pro-life. It is about our right as an individual, as a woman, to decide for ourselves.
Mm-hmm.
Do not push us into something that the Supreme Court is going to tell us we must do. You know, let's face it, Roe versus Wade has been around a long time.
50 years.
Yes, and it has been, I believe that when it was initially brought forward, it was totally different than what it is today.
Well, I remember, and you guys are a tad older than me. All right, Bill's ancient, but I remember back in like the 80s, people talking about how it was bad case law because it was taking the power away from the states.
Do you know
That's
that it
how
was
long-
started in a political race?
I do know that, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
It was an issue
It was.
a race.
Yep.
And look what it has developed into.
It's tearing the country.
It is tearing the country apart.
You know, it's I hate to bring it up, but you start looking at this could be the trigger for an actual war because it's, as we talked about earlier, it's black and white. You're either for it or against it. There is no nuance to it.
Exactly.
And 2 points on the Democratic side, which is supporting this. First of all, it's the party that can't define a woman that wants to
Well, yeah,
define all that good stuff.
Gosh, yes.
And, just as important, though, they're not willing to meet. This country's a country of compromise. Everything in this country has been set up in compromise.
Or should
and the
be.
basis of a compromise is you walk away, both sides walk away saying, I can live with it. I didn't get everything I wanted, but I can live with it. But they won't
Right.
even listen to say 15 or 20 weeks is the maximum. They want it to come out right through birth.
Oh,
Now they're walking it back, but there was bills in California that have been introduced post-birth.
yes, I heard about that.
Now, I have not researched it much, but the fact that that's even out there is insane to me.
You're right, Dan, because I heard about it.
I look at it as, you've got a full-term baby, which was 37 weeks, I believe.
It's a child.
It's not. Yeah. Well, that's where I'm going to go.
That is your child.
Anybody that can tell me that's a clump of cells. Well, guess what? 58 years old. I'm a clump of cells.
Now we have something we agree on.
Yep.
Yeah, but I'm the intelligent one. You got me on that one. I'll give you that one. That's a
Let's
point for
not
Bill, just so we
fight
know
over who's the
But,
most intelligent.
there's no nuance to it, like to the point you're both bringing up,
Right.
which is we can discuss it, and maybe there's no good solution, I don't think. But to Bill's point, no one can be totally happy if we can find a solution somewhere in the middle, wherever that might be. But there's not even willingness to have that discussion. at this point.
And I understand that we're going to abortion, but I think we're missing the two bigger pictures right now. First of all, for the first time in the history of the Supreme Court, there was a leak.
Exactly.
Well, that's a scary thing.
And then the
Yes.
second part of that is that judges are being harassed at their homes against federal law, and nothing's being done about it.
And you see the Peppermint Patty sitting up there basically going, well, we don't have anything to say on it. Yeah, you're supposed to have something. You're supposed to
Of
enforce
course,
the
she doesn't have
Constitution.
anything to
Well,
say.
she's left now, but
Yeah, that is very scary.
you think
What-
about they're sitting outside Clarence Thomas's home,
Alito, they're all.
and that's judicial interference. It's cut and dried, point blank is what it is.
And federal law forbids you to try to influence a judge before a decision is being made.
Yes.
And you can't get clearer than standing in front of his house, yelling at their families, and
Harassing their families.
Yeah, and so far, to my knowledge, there's been no real damage to a house. I'm not sure of that, but to my knowledge,
I don't know of any, but I also think it's just a matter of time.
Do you think that the leak might have been intentional?
there's no doubt about it.
Oh, I don't think there's any question that it was. Now,
I had my thoughts exactly.
looking at it from a strategic standpoint, they should have held it longer because this will somewhat fizzle out at election time.
Yeah, but my question with the Democratic Party is always, if this is what they want us to look at,
What are they
what's
hiding?
going on
Yeah.
over here that we don't know
Yeah.
Well,
about?
I think
Yep.
in this particular case is they know that literally every other issue they have nothing to stand on anymore.
Yeah, but except the latest research just came out, and and they're sharing it among themselves. People at this point are looking. The abortion issue is not that important
It's
to
not
the
a
fact
big issue to most
that
people, right?
they've got inflation that's killing their homes. The paycheck to paycheck
yes.
people that's a good slice of our country. They're estimating now that inflation stays where it is. The average middle class family is going to have a $5,200 a year expense added to their bills, of which over $2,000 of it is going to be gasoline.
Yes.
Yep.
I filled my car yesterday. It was $4.17 a gallon. I have never in my entire life paid this much for a gallon of gas.
The good news is tomorrow you get to fill mine.
Yeah.
Never have I ever paid that much.
The Democratic Party is scrambling. They know the hammer's coming. So they're trying to pinpoint certain issues. Abortion would be one to fire up their base. The other one's going to be guns rights, right? We're seeing that over what happened this past
And
weekend.
the third one will be the environment.
And then going green will be the third. And that's all they have to run on right now. So if they can make those the issues, that can gum up the race a little bit.
Except research is going to still say the only thing right now important to the average voter is my paycheck and how much I can spend of it or how little I can
Exactly.
spend of it.
Can I
How
put
can I
food on the
live?
table
Yeah.
literally?
Pay my rent, put food in the car, and get to work.
Right. And
Food in the
and
car.
Food in the
clothe
car.
my children.
And then drive it home and then go to work.
You thinking of the DeLorean? You're going to drop the garbage in there? That was a good movie, though. But
you
I
got me.
digress.
I'll give you one on that one. That's
Okay,
yours.
so we're even
Families
1-1.
care about daily things. They care about getting to work, putting their children in school, clothing them, feeding them, paying the bills.
You know what I would like to see come back? Remember Reagan's famous line? Are you better off now than you were 4 years
Yes.
ago?
Oh, that's-
yes.
Why aren't they? Why is not the Republican Party using that? And
Because I
hammering
think they're saving it for
All right, for
24.
the
24.
prime-
Oh, I've seen
presidential?
it out there a few times.
I mean, that's all I would say if I were them. Are you better off now, or 2 years ago at this particular juncture?
And doesn't it feel like it's happening much faster than we thought it would?
There are people that predicted that Joe Biden would take us down in 6 months.
Oh, but it's
Yeah,
very
I-
scary to me because
I'll-
it seems like it's so
I actually
rapid.
have the different view than you, Mary. I think I expected it to be much worse than it is now already.
Really?
When the election happened,
This is pretty bad, Dan.
I know. Well, and my wife will tell you I have a pessimistic viewpoint on the future. I honestly don't think the country is going to survive. I really don't think it will. There's too much division at this point. And how that division will happen, I don't know. But you're not going to convince the other side from you, whichever side you're on, you're not going to convince them to come meet in the middle. It's just not happening anywhere.
I know.
The only way I see it stopping is if potentially we get some candidates that vocally, before they're elected, say, I'm going to work with the other party and actually show they're going to do that.
Unfortunately, that won't get them elected.
No,
But
it
then I
will
was-
not.
Yeah, my next thought was going to be,
Not
but
right
if they
now.
do that,
Nope, not
the
right now.
base of their party is going to turn on them. That's why they don't do it. You look at somebody like DeSantis. DeSantis is an amazing man. Forget what party he's on. He speaks his mind. He says, I'm going to do this, and he does it. I respect that.
And he's not afraid to defend himself.
And he's polite about it.
But think about this. He got into office and he built himself a reputation before he started being
did.
the bad guy.
Well, they're trying to make him into the bad
Yeah.
guy.
Well, that's what I'm saying. He established himself before he started speaking out. So that's what you have to do.
They talk about, have you heard of the fourth turning? So it's every 80 years we turn over. We're in the fourth turning now, with peaks in 2027. So that's when in theory, some disaster is going to happen. What that is, we don't know yet. We're already starting to see signs of it. And I honestly, I admit I am pessimistic about it, but I could see the country falling apart at that point. The 2024
I hope
election.
you're wrong.
I don't want to be right in any way, shape, or form. The 2024 election. Think about, let's say Trump runs and wins. Do you think the people running California, Oregon, and Washington are going to sit there and go, okay? They're
No,
not.
but we have to have faith that he knows what to do to turn that around. Am I right, Bill?
I'm not sure I agree with Dan on the fact that I'm not sure with those particular groups you're going to be able to do that.
You can't
They're
reason
just so
with them.
far out.
You cannot reason with them.
But I have an interesting thought with some of that, though. And I'm from a generation a little older than both of you. Decades. Go ahead. I thought I'd do it before you did.
Millennium. But,
And, I remember growing up during the Vietnam War issues. And very frankly, my generation has been fighting the Vietnam War for 60 years.
yeah,
Yes.
I can see your point there. Yeah.
That we have been battling each other, the left and the right, for 60 years, and that has not gone away. Pick a topic, we go to the opposite side of it. We'll change sides, but we'll never go on the same side.
Right.
Okay.
Right.
And things may get better when all those other people who are not like me die off, and from that generation, and just leave me the sole generation left to take things on.
No, I disagree because here's the thing. Vietnam was stated it was a crisis, okay? Well, here we were again in Iraq, Afghanistan, in a crisis. When we left Vietnam, nothing changed. Not one thing changed. That country stayed the same. We lost 58,000
Except-
people.
If you were part of Vietnam, the country did not support that war.
No.
But they did support the war on terror, whether it wore off in years later. But they
Well-
went into Vietnam. I will tell you, when we were told in uniform not to wear uniforms off base. I was spit out and
Absolutely.
called baby killer.
Yes.
Yeah.
You just couldn't do any of that stuff because
Right.
the country was so polarized. And if you were military and you stayed in your position, you should run into Canada. You're a traitor. And they were after us. My wife could not walk with me in uniform because it was dangerous for her.
Do you think that as bad as it was then, it's the same now, or my perception is it's worse now? What do you think?
Things, unfortunately, in our country, we always magnify it. It doesn't get smaller. So I agree with you that it's probably magnified because, again, if you want to go back to a time, go to the 50s, if you will, okay? There were
I can't remember those, Bill. I wasn't alive then. But I'm bummed.
With all things
2
going
for
on,
1.
with all things going on, and I will get a line out here eventually. With all things going on, though, there was a certain politeness that went on then. I mean, you had issues.
Yes.
But there was a certain
Yes.
politeness. And we have worn decade after decade away
Right.
from that.
Yes.
So we reached where we are today where there's no respect left for anybody who doesn't agree with you.
That's
5
right.
minutes online on
Exactly.
social media, right? And you see vicious attacks.
We actually cared about one another. When I was a child, we actually cared about each other. You didn't say or do things.
Yeah, that was the one-room schoolhouse in Maine with the 5 kids that were going to school. However,
Watching the windmill.
however, we have to pay bills again, guys, because we reached that point,
Okay.
believe it or
This
not.
is flying by today.
So let's pay a few bills and wrap it up.
All right. The clerk of court makes legal decisions that affect the lives of Brunswick County citizens daily. The current clerk of court, who is an attorney, has demonstrated this for many years. Katie Maiden has practiced law for over 10 years. To ensure that this quality of service continues, vote Katie Maiden for clerk of courts. Paid for by the committee to elect Katie Maiden.
My name is Brian Wilson. I'm running for district court judge. During my lifetime, I've gone from protecting your God-given and constitutional freedoms as a combat vet of the U.S. military to working locally as a carpenter building homes while I worked my way through college. For the past 17 years, I've been protecting and defending your constitutional rights in the courtroom. I'm currently protecting our rights of our most vulnerable, our children, as the guardian ad litem attorney advocate for the children of Brunswick, Columbus, and Bladen County. I've spent my career serving our country, our state, and our communities, so I ask that you continue your confidence by voting for me, Brian Wilson, in the primary elections on May 17th. Thank you.
Veteran Awareness sponsored by You Are Not Alone. Today's veteran homeless rate is approximately 19,750, and the numbers are declining because of the various veteran programs. If you or a veteran you know is homeless, please call 877-4AID-VET. This is a confidential and toll-free call. From this veteran to other veterans, please be there to help our brother and sister veterans. Again, the number is 1-877-424-3838. And thank you for your service.
We need judges who serve we the people, not self-interested career politicians. This is Jenny Statting, wife of Judge Michael Statting, your conservative candidate for North Carolina Court of Appeals. Michael is a former prosecutor, sitting Republican judge, and a reservist in the United States Air Force. Michael is a lifelong public servant. That is why I'm asking you to remember to vote for Judge Michael Statting, your conservative candidate for North Carolina Court of Appeals. Paid for by the committee to elect Michael Statting. Michael Statting is a reservist for the United States Air Force. Use of the job title does not imply endorsement by the Department of Air Force or the Department of Defense.
This show is also sponsored by Dr. Tony Maglione. Dr. Tony is a cardiologist practicing in Wilmington. He accepts Medicare patients, and his office is located across the street from New Hanover Regional Medical Center at 2032 17th Street. The office number is 202-1071. Dr. Tony is an author whose last book is Rules for Conservative Patriots, and it can be purchased on Amazon. His website is www.drtonymag.com.
I'm Trey Allen, conservative candidate for the North Carolina Supreme Court. As a Marine Corps veteran, practicing attorney, professor of law, and father of 5, I want to pass on the precious freedoms that we inherited to the next generation. For that to happen, we need judges who will faithfully apply our Constitution and our laws, not rewrite them to achieve specific outcomes. If you share my commitment to liberty, please vote Trey Allen in 2022. Paid for by Trey Allen for Justice.
People, believe it or not, we've run through our hour and very quickly and with a lot of good information. We have very few seconds left to just say goodbye, but remember, you got a half hour left to vote. It's Tuesday evening. Get out there and vote. You got till 7:30.
Too, so why not get out and
go for ice cream when you're done, but get out there and vote.
Ooh,
anyway,
this
is Bill Moore,
Mary Stillwell,
and Dan Roman.
Please
wishing
vote.
you well. Vote.
Go vote. Vote.
Good show.